I will add, I always like to have the last word. I will add to what Tina said about Miss Lizeth. Where'd she go? There she is. If you don't know her and you get to know her, you will absolutely fall in love with her. One of the sweetest kids I have ever met in my entire life. She just warms your heart. She just grows into you. So congratulations, young lady. I'm very proud of you and very happy for you. I will see you in heaven. We are doing our transformation series, and I said last week that there are 7 areas, and this series was put together by another minister, a guy named Rick Warren. Most of you probably have heard of Rick. And he says there that God basically wants to be involved and influence every dimension of our life, which we sort of know, but sometimes it's good to consciously remind ourselves of it. And last week we talked about our spiritual health. How can you talk about transforming yourself if you don't talk about your spiritual health? And I found it interesting that second on the list, Warren put physical health. Now, I'm not sure that's how I would have structured them, but he wrote the series, so I'm going to go with his list. He says that he actually thinks that physical health is one of the things that most Christians ignore the worst. And sometimes, he says, when we decide that we're going to become better Christians and that we want to transform our lives, we start thinking about all the stuff we need to do. We need to pray more. We need to read the Bible more. We need to be really sweet to people like Lizeth is and all these other things. And the last thing we ever think about is, well, maybe we should eat healthier or sleep more or turn more of our problems over to Christ. So today, physical health. And I think God does care about that. Let me read a proverb for you. Proverb 14:30 says, "A tranquil heart gives life to the flesh, but envy makes the bones rot." And we could restate that something like, a relaxed attitude and having a peace of mind can literally make the physical body healthier. And negative emotions, which increase stress, can literally weaken the physical body. And we know that, of course. I can't tell you how many people have gone to the doctor and they check everything up and down, the blood and the medicines and whatever else they're on, and the doctor basically then gets to the point where he says, "Is there a lot of stress in your life?" And the people immediately get defensive. "It is not mental, it is physical. I am physically sick." No, I'm not saying you're not physically sick. I think your mental stress is causing your physical sickness. The body releases a chemical called cortisol into the blood when we are under stress, and it is a nasty little molecule, and it kind of messes us up. It causes us to retain weight, and it causes us to age. It keeps cells from being able to repair themselves. So it sounds a little quaint or whatever. A tranquil heart gives life to the flesh, but envy rots the bones. But the truth of the matter is, that's exactly what happens. Stress can weigh. Now, we're doing a series tonight. We'll go into sort of a different aspect of this. This morning, I'm not really going to talk about how many miles you should be running or how many calories you should be eating. Frankly, I don't really care how many calories you eat. What we are going to talk about this morning is stress. And is physical stress, is emotional stress causing physical problems in your life? Because God says He doesn't want that to be the case. The more emotionally stressed you are and the more physically unhealthy you become, the less valuable you are to Him and His kingdom. And remember, God says we own nothing on the world, even our own bodies. God says this belongs to Him. He's put the Holy Spirit into it, and He fully intends me to make God-conscious decisions and use this physical body to glorify Him. And so if I allow my body to become run down, lack of sleep, or too much stress, then it harms what I can do for God. So he lists 7 areas that are causes of stress. Now, before anybody panics, I know what you're thinking. Normally the preachers talk about 3 points in a Sunday morning sermon. This joker's got 7 on the screen. Don't worry. Don't worry. My in-house mentor, as it is, sent me a gentle reminder that the worst time to preach a long sermon is on Mother's Day. So I have been duly warned, and I will preach this sermon as fast as I preached that wedding last night. And some of these things overlap, but I think you agree. Some combination of these is what causes the stress in our life. We're worrying about something. Work can certainly cause stress in our life. Just problems that we have, decisions that we need to make that we're really struggling with. If we face some kind of a loss, financial or personal, if we face real opposition, or if we just live in fear. Any of those things can cause stress. And so what we're going to do is use the 23rd Psalm, and most of you are familiar with this Psalm. We're going to use the 23rd Psalm. I'm going to read it for us in just a second. And then we're going to punch down through what the 23rd Psalm has to say about dealing with these 7 issues. And you'll see, again, they overlap some, and you'll see very common themes as we go through these 7 points. Would you basically give it to God, trust God, and have patience? But I get ahead of myself. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So let's get on this short Mother's Day sermon. Worry. What does God say about worry? He says, look to me to meet all your true needs. There's a great saying, God doesn't always give us everything we want, but God does give us everything that we need. There's a neat verse in Romans that says, if God gave up his son for you, then you know he loves you. I'm paraphrasing that, but that's essentially what Paul writes in Romans. We don't have to question if God cares. We don't have to question if he loves us. But right now, I'm not feeling particularly good. These things are going this way and that way. Right. But stop and focus back on the cross. If God would send his only son to die that way for you, really and truly, we don't have any right to question, and therefore we don't have any right to worry. David started that psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The Lord is my shepherd. If the God is taking care of me, I may go through some difficult things in life, and the Bible talks about that, and how God can actually use those difficult things to refine our character. But we don't have to worry in the worldly sense of worry. It's difficult. And sometimes when we go to God with our worries, it doesn't seem like he answers. And sometimes his answer is, because this child of mine, and boy, I am talking right to the preacher now, needs more patience. Anything I've ever worried about in my life, anything ever. Now, I'm not going to have fun talking to God about this aspect of my life when I go through judgment. Anything I've ever worried about in my life ever always turned out to be impatience on my part. And it's a little humbling when you look back and realize that. Work can cause stress. And this is probably the simplest way to put it. Obey God's instructions about rest. Man, we get so caught up in work and Little League games and going to this event and going to that function and checking our Facebook page every 19 minutes. And I'm kind of throwing all that into one giant. We let things, work in particular for most of the adults, come to dominate and define us and sometimes cause us tremendous stress. But David wrote in the Psalm, he makes me. Not he gives me a spot if I so decide. He makes me lie down. God has designed our bodies. Don't understand why. God has designed our bodies to literally sleep 1/3 of our lives. Now, you may not let your body sleep 1/3 of the time, but that is the way that God designed it. 1/3 of your life, God intends you to spend sound asleep. I take him up on the deal. I'm happy to do it. I'm not going to lie to you. We were at that wedding last night and said, well, I guess we're going to head on out. And they're like, well, it's only 9 o'clock. We're like, you cannot put only in front of 9 o'clock. It is as late as 9 o'clock, and this old man needs to go home and get in the bed. I barely made it through the garage without falling asleep. So I may fail the worry test, but I don't fail the work test. I will get my rest. He makes me lie down in green pastures. God set the example. Seventh day, what did he do? Created everything in 6 days, and on the seventh day, he just put his dogs up and he rested. And we can do the exact same thing. Sleep is probably the most underutilized resource in America. We all can take advantage of it. And I would argue the single biggest underutilized resource in America is probably sleep. And I would encourage you, don't let your work and the busyness of your schedule stress you out. Problems. Now it's getting a little harder. Worry was kind of tough. Now you get the problems, though. It is true that sometimes we worry about things that weren't worth worrying about. Sometimes the things we worry about never came to fruition. But most of our problems are real, and they can be difficult to deal with. And God says sometimes you have to step away from your problems and recharge yourself. And if you use this psalm as our lesson, David wrote, he leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. I don't think those are two disconnected thoughts. I think that's a very connected thought. He leads me beside still waters to restore my soul. That's his plan. The world is a beautiful place in some sense. There's a lot of pain and there's a lot of suffering, and I understand that. And oftentimes when the staff of this church is communicating, that's one of the things that we remind each other of. There's a lot of people in this community who hurt and who are lost and who are confused or who are addicted, and we have to be there to help those people and to pull them up and give them hope. I'm not trying to whitewash the fact that the world's a difficult place. I'm not trying to do that at all. But even though Christ was marching toward his death, he said he set his face steadfast to go toward Jerusalem, where all the prophets have to die. He still took time to enjoy the beauty of God's wonder. Paul writes in Philippians that we should intentionally focus our mind on positive things. If there's anything at all good that you can find, Paul says, if there's anything lovely or anything praiseworthy or anything beautiful, he says, then try to focus on those things at least some of the time, because it is amazing how it can lift your spirits. My medicine for this is you go hang out with Gail Naylor. She will make you laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh, and you will kind of forget, at least for the moment, what your problem was. You may also wonder, why am I hanging out with Gail Naylor? And I hope nobody sees me in public. But for those of you who don't know Gail, she's a little lady whose face is just above the thing back there. There she goes. If she stands on the chair, you can see her. Short people are funny. I don't know why. Find something humorous. Find something beautiful. Have you ever just gone? Tina and I have always said, now we haven't been to the ocean in probably 8 years, but we've always said, we don't care where we go when we go to the beach, because we're not going to do anything but park ourselves and just listen to the water roll in. That's all we want to do. The ocean is beautiful, and it's an amazing thing that God created. And I don't care about any amusements or anything else. I don't care what the food is like. I just want to sit on the beach and just watch the horizon. And it does help. Now, again, that doesn't make your problems go away, and I understand that. And there's all sorts of Christian counsel, and there's the Bible, and there's prayer that we can go to. But God will lead you beside still waters to restore your soul if that's an option for you. Don't let a problem consume your mind. Force yourself to get out, to engage with others, and to enjoy God's beauty. Indecision. And this one sounds so simple, and people just turn their head and look at me over their glasses when I say this. I'm having trouble making a decision. I'm not sure what to do, or I think I've made the wrong decision. Go to God for guidance. That's God's plan for that. He leads me, David says, in paths of righteousness, but for his sake. Not for David's sake, but for God's sake. So remember, when you have indecision, the first rule is my life was designed by God, for God. And I've got to look at everything from God's point of view if I'm going to ever end up having this peaceful, unstressful life. Everything's got to be. So David says, He leads me in paths of righteousness. That's awesome. He leads me to make all the right decisions. In all your ways acknowledge him, one of the Proverbs says, and he will direct your paths or make them straight. He will help you make the right decisions. No doubt. But unless you are saying, and he does it for his name's sake, you're still missing part of it. So when you have a decision to make, my advice is, first thing, think and say to God, I want to make this decision to make you the happiest. I want to make this decision to glorify you, to show your love to the community that I live in, and to further refine my character so that I become more and more like Jesus Christ every single day. That's what he says. I will tell you this, I think too many Christian people make decisions in isolation. I think Christians are designed to live in community. Now the Psalms, the first couple of Psalms, really warn about this. I am not telling you, go to anybody in the Kroger or whoever happens to live on the left side of your house as a neighbor. I'm not telling you to go to anybody for decision making and advice. But I am telling you, you should have some trusted Christian friends or family that you can go to ask advice. God often speaks to us through the Bible, and he often speaks to us through other Christians. And I think sometimes when we are in indecision, we isolate ourselves when we should be doing exactly the opposite. I think that indecision and fear of making the wrong decision is one of the major causes of stress. Not treating our bodies right by not getting enough sleep is probably the biggest. But I sometimes think indecision is a major cause of stress. I encourage you to pray constantly about your decisions. I use the word patience already twice today. Here it comes again. I encourage you to be patient. Now, if you're sitting at an intersection and the guy behind you is blowing the horn and you got to go right or left, you kind of can't be patient. You're going right or left. And just so you know, my batting average on that in my entire life is exactly 0. I have never, ever guessed which way to go and gotten it right. In fact, my best friend from high school, when we would get lost, he would ask me, which way should we go? And whatever I said, he would go the opposite, and we would always get there. I hate him for that, so he's no longer my friend. Guys, pray about it. Here's what I have to do. When I pray about my decisions, I have to tell God I'm going to be patient. I almost have to hold myself accountable to God, if that makes sense. God, I really need to know what to do here. And I really want to make the right decision. And I'm so self-focused, I'm trying hard to think, but I got to do what's going to be best for you and your kingdom and your glory. And then I go into this big, whole, humble thing about, and help me to be patient. Because I'm so cocky, I think I know the right thing to do always. So I encourage in your indecision to have patience. He will lead you in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Loss. Trust God in life's low points. Again, I understand. These are high-level points. And whoever's just faced a tough decision, or whoever's just faced a really bitter loss, or whoever's struggling with what seems an insurmountable problem, and I'm just throwing these, well, just step away from your problems and go to the beach. That's what the preacher said. Go to God for guidance in life. Trust God in the Lord. I know that sounds simple, and I'm not trying this morning to solve anybody's life in a 20-ish minute sermon. Rick Warren has said this about this sermon series, and every preacher says it every other week at least. I cannot change your life from this platform. You have to change your life inside out during the week. All I'm trying to do, guys, is give you some very high-level points. And then you have to decide if you want to change your life inside out in the other 6 days that I'm not standing up here preaching at you. Trust God in life's low points. Here's a little secret Mama probably already let you in on. God does not promise that life will be easy or perfect on this earth. Now, he absolutely promises it in the next life. But he absolutely does not promise it here. He does give us these great little verses like in Romans 8 where it says that all things work together for good for those who believe in God and are trying to go according to his purposes. Even if you make a stupid decision, somehow God says, no, I can work that back for good. And we have some comfort in that. The problem with loss sometimes is it causes us to question God. But if he loves me, go back to Romans 5. We know that God loves us, Paul said, because he put Jesus on the cross. Next question. Loss causes us to separate, however small, from God, to question just a little bit his love for us. And in some ways that's natural, but in every way that's unfortunate. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, David said, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. Which means even you not only give me guidance and direction. I'm this aimless, goofy little sheep, and you're kind of pushing me to stay you don't be too close to the cliff and fall off to my death. But even if you use it to punish me, it's still for my comfort. And so sometimes in our loss, we just have to pray to God, use this somehow to refine my character, use it to draw me closer. I have rarely seen a major loss in someone's life leave them static in their Christian faith. They either become much more deeply committed or they start to question and spin out. Again, when you face a loss, do not isolate yourself from other Christians and do not isolate yourself from God. There are Psalms in the Bible where David is just wailing about the things that are happening in his life. And he's just being honest with God. I don't get it, I don't like it, and I don't want it anymore. And some of those Psalms, like 42 and 43 in particular, David ends up at the end of the Psalm going, but ultimately I trust you and I'll rest in your love. And I'll understand that you have a bigger picture even if I can't see it right now. Read Psalm 42 sometime. I mean, David starts off and he's just ill. Well, actually, he starts off, it's as a deer pants for the water, I think. It's kind of this pretty little poem, song kind of a thing. But it doesn't take him but about 2 verses and he's on it. Fed up with it. I'm being mistreated. I'm sick of it. He talks about the waves of God's wrath pushing him down and deep cries out to deep, which means my problems were bad enough and now you're just dumping more on my head. So I'm not saying that you can't say to God, I don't understand this and I don't particularly like it. I'm just saying, don't pull away from God. When you have a loss, I promise you he's there. And I think it's okay to be honest with God. This hurts and it hurts deep and I don't like it and I don't understand it. And I'm coming to you with faith and with patience and I'm begging for wisdom. And I think that's okay. God's a loving Father. He knows life hurts sometimes. That's why he hates sin. Opposition. Let God be your defender. David says, you prepare a table for me right in the presence of my enemies. And you anoint my head with oil till my cup overflows. Plain and simple. You will face opposition in this world. You just will. The world isn't fair and you won't be treated fairly. And what you have to go on is that God is your defender. Now again, you're not going to understand it. I cannot sit down with any Christian and go through the things that are happening in their life and explain to them every detail today of how God is working and using the things in their life for positive and how Satan is trying to twist every single thing in their life for negative. I can't do that. Now, oftentimes, and I can do it with my life to some degree, I can look back over time and go, wow, look what God was doing. He brought me here and he put me there and he put that person in my life and this happened and that happened. And sometimes when I look back, I'm amazed and I feel really dumb and really small. But I'm not saying that I can do it for you up front. You will face opposition in life. Let God be your defender. God says, don't worry about avenging every wrong that happens to you. As much as it depends on you, actually, he says, live at peace with everybody and be nice to your enemies and let God worry about vengeance on Judgment Day. Again, not easy, I understand. If you are facing opposition, I would say the same thing. You should be communicating with Christian friends about the opposition that you are facing. Fear, last one. Told you this wouldn't be long. Trust God. But I'm afraid. I'm anxious. Trust God. I know, easier said than done. Easier said than done. Surely, David says. And sometimes I think we use the word surely because it's like, man, things are going okay right now for me. Surely goodness and mercy from God are going to follow me all the days of my life. Because I am on such a mountaintop high right now. And sometimes we're at the very bottom of the cavern. And we're going, surely, with a big question mark. Surely, God, your mercy's going to follow me all my life, right? I actually think that this verse can be used in either case. Surely, David says, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. And here's the end sentence to all the stress that we face from any of these 7 points. And I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. There you go. But life's tough, I know. And I lost my mom, I know. And I lost my job, I know. And my neighbor's unfair, I know. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Congratulations. You win. Guys, Jesus said in John 14, I go to prepare a place. And if I go to prepare a place, I promise you I'm coming back to get you. So while you are on the earth, you will face opposition, and you will face struggle, and you will face loss, and you will have some insurmountable problems, and you will have some very difficult decisions where whatever decision you make, you're going to make one party or the other mad. And those are the hardest decisions to make. And what you've got to be able to look those parties in the eye and say is, I solved this problem because I felt that's how God wanted me to do it. I made my decision this way because I felt it would glorify God the best. And I'm going to ask you to agree with my decision because you wouldn't want me to unglorify God with my life or dishonor God with my life. I faced a loss, and I'm going to intentionally use it to draw closer to my Creator. I know these things are more difficult than the words that are on this screen. But that is the starting point for every piece of stress that's in your life. Everything that causes you anxiety, angst, worry, everything that generates fear in your life and puts stress on your physical body, those are the answers. The Bible, prayer, Christian friends, and patience. Let me pray. God, I know today, we celebrated a wedding yesterday. We celebrated a baptism today. And those are beautiful things. Pieces of life that you've allowed us, Father, to enjoy. And we thank you for those. But I know today, God, right now in here, there must be dozens of people facing loss or opposition who are just nervous and anxious and fearful about what's coming up. God, I pray, give your peace to those people today. Help them feel and understand your love. God, I pray that if they go to your word, they find wisdom. That if they go to a Christian for advice, Father, that they find comfort and direction. God, be with those who are hurting this morning. Be with those facing loss this morning. Be with those, Lord, who are worrying this morning. Let them take this week to readjust their life around your glory using the principles in Psalm 23. God, we thank you again for our mothers and just pray that you continue to bless them throughout this day. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.
In our hearts, Lord.